All right, so since we're live now, we're here with Grant Peters and Jason Bergman from the International Trumpet Guild Board. Guys, thanks for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate all you guys do. And, the last time I saw you guys was a few months ago at Jason's awesome BYU Trumpet Fest, which was a lot of fun. Thanks for hosting that, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for being there, both of you.
It's a great time.
Yeah, it was a very good time. It was very, very good. Plus, it was my first time to Utah, so I got to see the mountains and everything because they're not the same mountains we have in Kentucky. We call it mountains around here, but it's kind of like hills.
Yeah, green hills, but yeah.
So anyways, well, thanks for joining. And we have some questions. People can be sending in questions through Facebook Messenger as we're live. We'll kind of see what everyone wants to talk about. But a few things, people already been curious. So first, let's start with Grant. How's it going during the stay-at-home order?
It's going pretty good. I think I'm a little more productive without the necessity to be at school. You have time between lessons when you're not at your desk taking care of university business. You can take care of things like things around the house, or actually ITG things I can get done earlier in the day. I found that with the leadership of this organization, I'm finding that you have to block out a couple hours a day just to deal with things that come along. And it's not necessarily really glamorous stuff, but it's things that need to be taken care of. And so that part of it's great. I get a lot more done at home right now. So I think everyone's making better use of their free moments during this. So it's been pretty good.
So Jason, how are you adapting?
There's a lot of things that I like about this. I like getting to not have to commute anywhere. So it's just more productive. You can teach a lesson and then just turn around and practice and then go downstairs and have lunch with your kids. And so there's some really positive things. Thankfully, my family and where we live in the United States isn't struggling as much as other parts of the country. And so, we're really mindful of them. I've got family that live in New York City, and thankfully they're okay, but it's been really rough. So there are blessings and good things happening despite the struggle. We're still, we just finished our semester last week here. And so it was kind of good to get all the way through that. And, half the semester was online, and we're just doing the best we can. So, but anyway, things are going well, all things considered, for sure.
Yeah, so go ahead.
I have to agree with the part about the blessings. I mean, and there's so many good things happening that we don't really notice. I mean, we're spending more time at home and not driving our cars and polluting the environment. You can see the skylines of major cities are clearing up, and there's a lot of blessings here. And this is going on all over the world. I mean, we're not alone in this, and I think we just need to be really cognizant of the fact that there's some good things coming out of this, as horrible a situation it is. So
yeah, even by my house, the other day there was a red fox walked right by, and we're downtown, and that usually doesn't happen. So there's more wildlife and things happening just because there's not as many cars on the road and not as many activity outside.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Jason, you touched on it. So you guys just finished up your semester at BYU. So how did you adapt? Educationally, how did you do that with your studio?
That's been interesting. I think we're still adapting. I kind of felt like every week as we went through a cycle of lessons, things improved. From a technology aspect, everybody, including my students and myself, we all got better at figuring out how to use Zoom and, maximizing our audio settings and trying to find a way to do things. Thankfully, before all this started, we did all of our assignments and, lesson paperwork online. I have a shared Google sheet with each student. And so we were able to easily keep track of assignments, and we can easily share things, share music on the screen or whatever. So a lot of things kind of seamlessly went into that. We're experimenting a little bit too with, and going to be experimenting more with doing some recordings. Hopefully, if students can do some assignments and record them, you can kind of get a better sense for how they're playing and, some of the subtleties that I think you lose a little bit in Zoom. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's gone okay. And we just, our studio, we just decided to be positive about it. And so we haven't had much complaining, or, you know, when there's little glitches or things, we just kind of roll with the punches. And we're looking at it as something different and trying to find opportunities and positive things that can happen with it that we didn't get to do before. So we're experimenting with that. I know a lot of colleagues across the country have done a lot of things like you're doing, where they've invited people from long distances to kind of work with their students. We're going to probably do some of those things too over the summer. Even when we're not in session, we're still going to try to get together. I think my favorite part about what we did is we kind of turned our studio class time into just kind of a hang. And so once a week during a lunch hour, we just all got together on Zoom and just talked. And we really didn't talk much about trumpet. We just kind of made sure everybody was doing okay and told jokes. And that was really good for morale. I felt like we did that every Tuesday, and I felt my Tuesdays were so good that last month of the semester. It just kind of made things better. The toughest thing for me isn't the audio stuff and the video. It's just I just miss being with my students.
Right. So Grant, how are you guys adapting at Missouri State?
Well, kind of the same way. I think what Jason said about keeping the kids engaged is important. And I actually developed I didn't develop it. I just set up a private Facebook page it's called the Virtual MSU Studio. And it's just my students can be on there. And that's how I give them announcecements about what we're doing in the studio. And then I've had them every week, in addition to their assigned materials, I have a one etude and some technical aspect that I want them all to record. And then they submit it to that virtual page. And they're not worried about submitting it because it's just their colleagues in the studio that are going to hear it. So they all hear each other's videos. And then I make comments right there in the comments about like a lesson. I'll tell them what I'm hearing and they're playing. And then everyone's supposed to listen to that, see what I said about it, and they learn from that. And that's worked really well, I think. And one of the benefits, I think, of all of this is that many students don't know how the process works to be able to record themselves and represent themselves in a quality way. They're going to have to be asked to submit their playing at some point or some aspect of what they do, and many of them don't know how to do that. So this is kind of a good way for them to learn for the future what it takes to record themselves. I mean, any of us who've had students who've done NTC or something like that, they learn very quickly what a huge process that is, from preparation to scheduling, to getting in the hall, to get the right microphone, to how many times it's going to take to play that piece where they really get a good representative recording of themselves. So that's been one great thing about this, is that they now understand a little bit more about that aspect. And they'll have to do that when they're out teaching. Most of my students are educators, and they'll have to go out and they'll have to learn how to perform recordings of their bands and submit them. That's going to be the way it is. So that's been really good. And just staying in touch with everybody has been important, because different students handle this different ways. I mean, some of them are more bummed out about it, I would say, and some of them are rolling with it pretty easily. And sometimes that depends on home life or that kind of thing. But I think staying in touch with them and letting them know this is just going to be, in a few years, we're going to look back at this. It's just that weird year where we had that coronavirus, and they need to know that this is not going to last forever. So I think that helps with keeping their morale high and keeping them moving ahead. So.
Yeah. So Grant, that was great. You touched on preparation. So if I was a high school junior right now, going into my senior year, getting ready for college auditions, and how would you help me adapt through this virtual world of next few months, since, all these lessons, everything's online? How would you help them adapt and kind of move forward as they're getting ready to, audition for colleges?
You mean in terms of how they prepare their college audition, or
Yes.
just what they should be doing? Well, I think it's very possible they should be aware that they may have to apply for their colleges online. They may have to record themselves. That's a distinct possibility in the future, and it's never too soon to start experimenting and getting online and finding out how best to record yourself. Just like my students, they may not be able to travel and play for somebody live. That's the typical way we've done this for a long time. But in addition to that, I would say take advantage of all the master classes and the things that are going on, like the Canadian brass guys are doing these master classes and having students play, and they can watch that. There's so much more potential for learning right now about the trumpet online than there ever has been. And that they need to be taking advantage of that and really finding out what's going on, and all the resources out there that can help them become better players during this. You know, this is a real opportunity in a lot of ways. I've told my students that this is the time to slow that metronome down on every key of your technique, and play it at a slow tempo and just inch it up every day, because there's nothing weighing on them like ensemble music or so. They can take the time now to really solidify some of the fundamental aspects of their playing, and really gradually bring it up slowly so they really learn it in a solid way. So that's what I would suggest. Just take advantage of this time and the resources out there to improve your playing.
Yeah. Jason, do you have any comments?
I think that Grant's right. I think that's an opportunity to focus on weaknesses. I'm doing that too. I'm thinking about all of the imperfections in my own playing, and I'm trying to work on those things, and hopefully trying to model that with my students. I think this has spurred a lot of creativity. You know, I think that I've never seen so many videos of trumpet players on social media as I have right now, and I'm almost kind of to the point where I don't even watch them anymore, because they kind of make I'll listen to some other stuff for inspiration. But unless Matthias Hoff sends out another video of him playing, you know, in his otherworldly way, no, but it's really awesome. And I think that I've seen with younger students that are really, you know, proficient in technology, they're going to be doing and creating a lot of things that I think are going to stick when this is all over. And, you know, I think that what we do is going to change in some ways, in really exciting ways, that we can use technology to help. And I think that what Grant said is right too, that I think that students aren't going to be as scared of recording themselves as much, because they're having to do it all the time now. And so I think that's just going to lead to better playing, and there's new ways we can collaborate too, you know. So anyway, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So one thing I've noticed with my students, that it's a learning curve with all this online virtual teaching, where at first, you know, someone's just sitting on a bed playing into an iPhone, and then next week you notice they have a nicer chair and a nicer stand. So we're learning to adapt as we go, especially for those juniors, going to be seniors. They have to prepare, because what if they have to audition online?
Exactly.
You know, there's different ways. So this is a good time to prepare. So we have a couple questions coming in. We'll kind of change subject a little bit to the International Trumpet Guild, because Grant, you're the president, and Jason, you're the vice president, president-elect. Congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So we'll start with Grant. So do you remember your first ITG? And if you do, what was it like?
I do remember. I remember every ITG I've ever gone to, actually. But the first ITG I went to, you know, for a lot of years, I told people my first ITG was '85 in New Mexico. But recently I was looking back at some of the conferences, and I think my first ITG was actually '84. It was an International Brass Congress at Bloomington, Indiana. That was before either one of you guys were born. But it blew my mind. I went with some friends. I remember I went to that ITG. I had broken my ankle playing Frisbee that summer, and I went in a walking boot. But it was, you know, going to these things and seeing all these players. It was a brass congress, so it was actually all the instruments were there. And just walking around, being able to see, you know, these world-class players standing next to you, looking at some music in a exhibit, and having them show you a piece of music and talk to you. It was incredible. Seeing the competitions, it was special. You know, when I was an undergraduate, my teacher used to tell us all the time. He said, "I got my ITG journal today, and I read it cover to cover." And we thought, "Oh man, whatever." You know, he'd do that. But then he said, "Why don't you guys all get together and go to one of these conferences?" And actually in '85, we all got in a van. One of our friends' parents gave us their custom van, and like 8 of us drove from Lincoln, Nebraska to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I remember, you know, we were hanging out in the dorms at that time. We stayed in the dorms, and I remember going over, I think this was the same conference we went over, and I went to this hotel, and down below in this hotel courtyard, there was an orchestra playing, and Håkan was playing something. I don't remember what it was. I was blown away because, we're about the same age, and I was a sophomore in college, and I couldn't believe the trumpet could be played like that. And I was this close to this guy. So really the most inspiring time of my year every year is ITG. And ITG, it's kind of come full circle from me just wandering around clueless about the trumpet and getting really excited about it to now being able to have a role in leading the organization. So I've been to a lot of them. I think I've only missed about 4 or 5 since then, because they were either too far away in the summer or I was in graduate school studying or something like that. But I haven't missed one in well over 20 years. So
that's good. So Jason, when was your first ITG?
Well, I was playing with He-Man when Grant went to his first ITG. I was alive, but I was
alive as well, but He-Man's here.
Yeah. My first one was actually in 2007. But I wanted to go to ITG for years, way before that. When I started playing trumpet, my teacher was an ITG member, and he would give me his ITGs. And after a while, I would just beg for money from my mom to be able to join ITG. And so I remember I actually was that kind of person. I remember in middle school getting ITG journals and then reading them the day that they came. And I was I didn't know who all the people were, but I paid a lot of attention to the ads. I wanted, trumpets like, all the big superstars had. Of course I didn't, but anyway, the first time I went was in 2007. That was in Amherst when Eric Berlin hosted it. I was a competitor in the orchestral excerpt competition, and going to that conference just it changed my world. I mean, it was so amazing. And so many positive things led to other things in my life. Like, for example, Paul Markello was a featured artist that year, and I went to his recital and was blown away by his playing. And he played a piece by Jim Stevenson it was Jim's Fantasy. And in fact, that was kind of a conference where they featured a lot of Jim Stevenson's music, and his popularity just continued to rise from that. But that summer, I went to Music Academy of the West and studied with Paul, and that led to other things. And so many positive things in my life have come just from that very first ITG conference. And over the last 10 years that I've been, teaching at the university level, I go every year, and it's a wonderful event because I leave inspired musically. I learned so much, and then I can reconnect with people that have become very dear over the years, and people like Grant and you and so many other people that it's about more than trumpet to me. It's really inspiring and kind of puts together the whole package and vision of what the ITG can really be for people. And I just remember so many experiences and concerts and classes and clinics that I've gone to at the various things that still impact me. So that was kind of a winding answer.
That's okay. Well, Jason, you mentioned inspiring. That reminds me. My first ITG was in Rowan, New Jersey. I think it was Rowan. Yeah, I believe it was. And the quick story about my first day was very inspirational. So I'm, my first time going to the exhibits. It's all exciting and it's all new. And then I was testing out a trumpet. I don't remember what brand it was. And I started playing Petrushka. And this guy came up behind me and goes, "That's not how it goes." And I look over, it's Doc Severinsen. And of course, I'm a little kid. Oh my gosh, that's Doc Severinsen. And of course, he just picks up any random B flat trumpet. He's got a water mouthpiece in his pocket. He picks one up, puts it in, and he just plays it on B flat, pastes it up the octave, everything, and looks at me. And I was like, it's amazing. It's super cool to get to see our trumpet heroes. I still, get a little giddy, talking to Al Vizzuti, even Vince Martino, we're friends, and everything. But it's cool to see all this stuff. And especially at the International Trumpet Guild is a great place for all these opportunities. And now, as an exhibitor and sponsor, one thing I'm really going to miss this year at the conference is just seeing the look on everyone's face when they get to see you after it's been a year, or you get to meet someone new. It's kind of like you're walking in a jewelry store and you see shiny things, and everyone gets excited to see that. And that's one thing I'm going to miss, just getting to see everybody. And everyone is so happy because we're all alike. We're all just trumpet players. We like to hear good music. You know, we're not judging anybody. We're just there to have fun. And it's just an experience. And I'm looking forward to Anaheim next year. But
that's
yeah.
That's one of the things that, along with what Jason said, it's just what it is a huge collaboration of people who love the trumpet. And people need to know that it's a very non-threatening environment. You might think going in and seeing all your idols and your heroes on the trumpet would be intimidating, but it's really just, you know, you're all in the hotel lobby or walking around the hotel, and everyone is equal. They're all just hanging out and having a good time learning. That's what it's really about, exchanging ideas and helping each other get better at your instrument. I mean, there are so many things to do at the conference, but it's a very positive experience. And one of the best parts about it is just seeing all the people you've met over the years, and everybody has their buddies they get to see probably once or twice a year, and it's at ITG. And that's why it's particularly sad that we weren't able to have it this year. It was terribly disappointing, especially when this was going to be my first conference with Jason in our positions. And it was the first time in our history we couldn't have a conference. And so it was terribly disappointing, but obviously the right decision. You know, there's way more important things than the trumpet. And because of that, though, I think we've already begun working on Anaheim next year with our wonderful host, JC Gilgilevsky. And we're convinced it's going to be a great conference. It's going to be now the 45th conference, because this was supposed to be the 45th year. That's going to add a special aspect to it. It's going to be in a beautiful place in Anaheim that we've been before. So everyone should block out those dates, June 1 through 5 next year in Anaheim. And you'll be hearing more about it. The preparations are well underway, even though we're still before what should have been the conference this year. So it's a great time. And if you're a young player or just an enthusiast or anybody that loves the trumpet, it will change the way you think about the trumpet, and it will inspire you like you never been inspired about playing your instrument. So we hope you'll plan to be there.
Yeah. So Grant, based on what you just said, so if someone has never been to an International Trumpet Guild conference before, describe roughly what does the week look like and what opportunities they have for hearing trumpet players or testing out gear or whatever.
Right. There's a lot of structure involved, but there's there's like 4 nights, and every night there's a marquee concert. We'll have one of the really big name artists performing. It may be a jazz concert one night, maybe a classical concert with orchestra one night, maybe with a band. Who knows? It depends on the forces we have. But then throughout the day, there's going to be clinics and master classes. You know, you want to learn about teaching beginners, or there may be a master class by an orchestral player or a soloist that does something with students. There are student competitions that you can attend. You can see how your peers from around the country are playing. You know, there's a lot of players there the same age as a lot of students that come, and now they can find out the expectations of someone their age playing, and they can be inspired by those people. During the whole conference, there's an enormous exhibit room. If anyone's ever been to their local music educators conference, they know that there's exhibits at those. Well, this is like those exhibits, but on steroids. It's everything you want to know about the trumpet. You want to find new music, you want to try mouthpieces, you want to see what kind of mutes are out there. Try virtually any instrument you want to try, you can try it. Piccolos, flugels, natural trumpets, any kind of trumpet gear. And that's really a fun aspect of this, because you don't have to go online and order it and try it and send it back. You can go right to the source and find out about it. So again, there's warm-up sessions, there's trumpet ensemble reading sessions, there's great things for students now. We have student mixers. We have a new ITG Facebook student group. That's a place where students can go, whether you're a member or not. You can join that Facebook group, and that's where you can go to find other students that can tell you about the conference, tell you about their experiences with ITG. It's absolutely for everybody. We have competitions for all ages. There are scholarships available. So I could go on and on and on. In short, it's just a collaboration. We're all in this together, and with our membership, that gives us the means to do for the trumpet community, and that's what ITG's mission has always been about.
That's great stuff. Jason, do you have anything to add about that topic?
I think Grant said it all. I can just attest to the fact that next year is going to be a fantastic conference. I was on the committee that helped plan the one this year in Columbus, and I'm also on the one for next year. And Ryan Gardner is the chair of that committee, and he and the group is already working to ensure that it's an inspiring, fantastic experience. And so I think people are going to be really happy with that as performers and artists and presenters are announced in the coming months. The only thing that I would say on top of what Grant said is that I really am happy with the way that the conferences are planned. Once ITG took ownership of the conferences and planned them themselves instead of having a university and that teacher host it, there's a peer review committee, which is this one I'm referring to, that picks the artists. So there's a lot more, there's a higher sense of review that goes into who's selected to present and what artists perform and teach. And it's a very fair process. It's not necessarily who you know, but you submit an application and it goes under review by this committee. The committee is very diverse in terms of who the people are that are on the committee and what their backgrounds are and what they do with the trumpet. So I think that it's a great time for people that are interested in presenting at an ITG conference, that the next round, next spring, when there's openings to apply for 2022, apply, try. And there's a space for everybody in the ITG, and there's a space for everybody at the conference as well. And you can go and just have the experience that you want because there's so much diversity in what's presented there.
Yeah.
One other aspect about our conference I want to point out is that we are the International Trumpet Guild. And although it's true that many of our members are from the United States, the large majority, we are committed to making it a very diverse event. And case in point, in our last Miami conference, there were presenters that represented 17 countries in 5 continents. So this is the time of year during the conference and in our journal as well that we invite and celebrate ideas and performers and authors from all over the world. We're committed to making it as diverse as we can, and we welcome everyone around the world to feel comfortable coming to our conference. We like to have them there because that makes it that much more interesting, and you can learn so much more if you have people outside our borders coming in and sharing with us. So.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, we're all looking forward to Anaheim next year. I think it was 2016, I believe it was Anaheim. That was a great conference, great location, great attitude. Everyone had a great time, and we're looking forward to that. So we have a few questions coming in. They're not ITG related. They're just trumpet related.
Great.
So we can start with Jason. So what is your approach to the daily warm-up? And do you keep the same warm-up every single day, or does it fluctuate based on what your performance you have coming up?
Since the question's for me, I'm going to speak to how I do it, but that doesn't mean it's the only way. My personality is kind of a personality that runs well on routine and kind of having a set thing that I do all the time. So my warm up is pretty consistent, but it does change. And I've noticed that over the years that my needs as a player change too. So just in a general sense, my warm up is mostly focused on sound. That's my priority all the time when I'm playing, sound and being musically expressive. And so I try to have both of those things be the focus of what I'm doing right from the very beginning. And I kind of have the same basic approach in my routine. And then depending on what I'm working on, I add things in. So, for example, earlier in our conversation, I mentioned that I wanted to focus on weaknesses in my playing. And I wish I could do lip trills like some of the people that we hear on these videos every week, that they post on Facebook. And so I'm doing a lot of work right now in my fundamental session on developing the ability to do lip trills better than I have been in the past. And so that's a new thing that I wasn't working on before. And so one of the things that I like to do is I do a kind of a self-reflective list of what I think my strengths and weaknesses are. And I start with what I think is my best attribute on the trumpet, and I go to my worst. And then I flip that list upside down, and then I start with what I'm worst at, and then I want to make my weaknesses my strength. So my, top 3 or 4 weaknesses that I have on that list get put into my fundamental session. And as those things become better, then I replace them. And so that's kind of like a not very specific answer, but mostly it's a routine that does adapt based on, what I need to be working on or what I have coming up. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, great answer. So Grant, do you have any, how do you warm up?
Well, I've got some pretty specific ideas about warm up, and it may be different for my students because they may have different needs. But for me, a warm up is anywhere between 5 and 20 minutes. And I think we need to be able to, I always tell my students, you need to be able to be ready to play in 3 minutes if you have to. Yes. But for me, it's about efficient tone production. Okay, that has to be the first thing, because anything you do the rest of the day, if you haven't established that process of really good balance in all the elements of tone production, then your day of practice is reinforcing something that's not very efficient. And so I've got to get to that first place where I think everything is moving forward, everything's to the front, everything is air generated, and I'm not have any tension or it kind of I'm bound up in any way. So lately I've been getting into the Thompson buzzing book a lot. I think that's a great way to really develop an efficient approach. But I do some buzzing, and as soon as I establish that, or some maybe, some lip bends or some breath attacks or whatever, as soon as I feel like my sound is moving pretty well, I may incorporate some kind of, a modified Clark second study or something like that to get me tonguing in the major and minor and slurring and that kind of thing. May add in some of flexibility studies. I've been working out of Scott Belk's first book actually lately. I really like that. And then I'm usually I'm good to go about 20 minutes. I'm pretty sure that after a certain point, I've started to practice then. And if you really want to call it a warm up, that's what I do to get ready to play for the day or to get ready to practice. So if I'm heavy into technical and scales and all that kind of stuff, then I'm already practicing. So as far as warm-up's concerned, efficient tone production, if you can get that going, then you can start practicing and feel like you've established something good to build upon that day.
Yeah, great stuff. So Grant, you mentioned tone production, and then Jason, you mentioned sound concept. So we'll start with Jason. So what is your sound concept, and who are your biggest musical influences on yourself?
Yeah. Can I answer that question, but add on one more thing to my previous answer before
Absolutely.
I do?
Go ahead.
I know that right now there's a lot of product placement about Pickett mouthpieces behind you. I don't know why that would be, but anyway, I could pull my Pickett mouthpiece out actually right now, but I don't mean to, I know I'm kind of
Grant has his.
Mine's over there on my bed. Anyway, I do want to mention something that has kind of radically altered what I do in my fundamental practice session. And I've been using this book for the last 6 months by John Daniel called Special Studies for Trumpet. And I'm not a John Daniel artist, but I would be. I mean, I think the book is so good. And I actually picked up some of those exercises in the book, and I didn't know that they were his, from other people that would come and do classes. And it's been a really, really great source of, exercises to work on a lot of things. So anyway, I want to put that out there because I think it's so good. And I think a lot of people would benefit if they check it out. Anyway, but kind of answering your question, for me, when I'm thinking about my sound, I want to have an open resonant sound. Resonance is an important word where my sound is balanced from the lowest note I can play to the highest note I can play, and that the sound is full and resonant, and it doesn't have any kind of like tension that would limit its resonance. And so for me, one of the most important models for sound was Phil Smith. I remember the first time I heard him on a recording, it was so inspiring. And then the first time I heard him live was so inspiring. And I remember the first time I kind of played for him in person in a lesson, he said, well, let's play some Charlier etudes. And so we started with etude number 1, and he said, let's just play it together. And I just like now I couldn't talk. I was like so nervous, but just hearing him start that etude and being, 3 feet from his bell was incredible. And just hearing the way his sound rings and has resonance, that was really important for me. And I'm from Dallas, Texas. And when I was growing up, Richard John Julio and David Bilger and Jeff Kernow, and, those guys were the principal trumpets then. And when I would hear the Dallas Symphony, they were really important on my early concept of my sound. Not to mention, my teachers also. But so my approach is kind of an orchestral approach, and it's based on air and sound. That was a really long answer, but I hope that kind of makes sense a little bit.
That's okay. So Grant, who's your big musical influences?
Well, let's see. I think probably that Phil Smith is an answer that a lot of people are going to give you. I think that I've talked to a lot of people about that. It's kind of this quintessential American trumpet sound that Phil Smith has, Dave Bilger has, Ryan Anthony, Tom Hooten. It's like this. It's this odd combination of sweetness and power. And you have both those things. A sweet singing sound, but when they want to put the hammer down, they can also. And it's changed over the years, actually, because when I was younger, I always had these dreams of being an orchestral player, and I'd listen to these recordings, and I was always trying to, drill out the throat of my mouthpiece to try to play louder and bigger and darker, and I was constantly chasing that, what was perceived as this orchestral sound. And then I realized that I needed to find a way to bring out the sound that was in my head and that really represented what I was thinking about my sound. And that was actually a lighter, sweeter tone, because I don't play well when I try to muscle the instrument and try to create something that really isn't a natural extension of who I am musically. So I would say that my idea of I've gotten back to more of I'm not forcing it as much anymore, and I think that's good for anybody, not to try to create something that really isn't representative of who you are musically. And then I've changed my perception of what I want to sound like to more of a lighter, I'm not light, but a sweeter tone on some things, and then the ability to really create some power and zip if you need to. And that's what I hear with a lot of the real impressive orchestral players and soloists now in our country. So there's a real unique similarities between some of those players I mentioned. That doesn't mean there aren't any other orchestral players that are great too, but those are the ones that all have a similarity in their sound. Chris Martin, of course, that's the one I left out. That's, if you've heard his recent Mahler 5 recording, I mean, it's like a soloist playing Mahler 5. It's wild. It's a different kind of, that performance is just stunning anyway. But to think that you can play something that's that physically demanding in such a musical way is incredible, inspiring. So.
Yeah. So Grant, you mentioned solos and soloistic. What's your favorite trumpet solo to perform?
Oh boy, there's a lot of, I love anything by Wazen or Turin, because I think those two composers write in a style that's so idiomatic. They understand the instrument, and of course Joe Turin wrote for Phil Smith a lot with him in mind, and D. Wazen wrote for, Chris Gecker. So they understand the trumpet and what works on the trumpet, and I think that's important. But I'm kind of a softie for the old sonatas of the 20th century that don't get played much anymore. The Halsey Stevens, the Kennon, and especially the Hindemith. Those used to be the staples, and they don't really get played as much as they used to. And I think they're being overlooked because they're great pieces of music. So I would say, actually the Hindemith is one I love to play. And for one of the reasons I like to play it is because I don't play it like a lot of people do, where I really put the foot on the gas and try to overpower it. It can be beautiful in different ways, and I think I've enjoyed playing that piece. I think it's a very fair piece too. All those pieces are very fair trumpet-wise. They don't ask you to do ridiculous things. If you play the trumpet well and you make a good sound and you understand how to play the instrument, you can play those pieces. So I would say any of the old 20th century, I say old 20th century pieces, the sonatas are my favorites to play.
So Jason, what's your favorite?
If anybody knows me, they know the piece I've played more than any other piece is Centennial Horizon by Kevin McKee. And I every time I play it, it's super fun to play, and I think it's really beautiful, and it doesn't get old for me, and people like it. And so there's so much great music that we have and that I love to play, but that's kind of probably become the piece that I love to play the most. But I would say that if I could play anything, if I had my dream, it would be that I could be a mariachi trumpet player. That's what I would love to do. You wouldn't expect it, but I don't know. We've been doing a lot of home projects here around our house, and I was working in my garden yesterday listening to mariachi in my headphones, and I don't know. It's just amazing. So that's just kind of a random thing, but someday I'll learn how to do that.
Yeah, those mariachis are really impressive, what they can do. I actually had a mariachi group play at my wedding reception.
Oh, nice.
I got married in Brownsville, Texas. My wife is originally from Mexico, and these guys, they came over in a pickup truck, and they were dressed to the T, and they got off and they played. And man, I had a bunch of trumpet players at my wedding, obviously, and these guys were like, "Man, how do they tongue like that? That's unbelievable." They said, "I've been trying to stop my students from tonguing like that forever. I got to figure out how they can do it so I can reverse it." But yeah, that's an impressive thing for sure.
Yeah, so you guys are mentioning many different styles, even orchestral and then soloistic. So a couple mouthpiece questions. So we'll start with Jason. When you switch styles between orchestral or you're doing solos or whatever you're playing, do you change mouthpieces or do you use one mouthpiece for all of those styles?
Yeah, I look at mouthpieces like tools, and you want to use the right tool for the right job. Most of what I play is even though I change styles, most of it's pretty consistent. And so I have one picket mouthpiece that I use for almost everything. And then when I have to do a couple, different things, then I get a different kind of picket mouthpiece for that thing. And I mean, I'm kind of being silly, but really I love playing on picket mouthpieces. But for the most part, I use the same mouthpiece for everything that I do, unless it's a different kind of job and I need to use the right tool for that job, if that makes sense.
It does.
I'm pretty much the same like that. I've never been a big gearhead as far as changing mouthpieces all the time. One of my teachers once said, it's not the mouthpiece. But I found something I really like, and it's also a picket mouthpiece. I do use a short shank, one of your short shanks for my C trumpet. That's the only, but I use the same throat and the same cup. I do switch obviously for piccolo, but it's pretty standard stuff. I haven't changed much over the years. Picket obviously gave me a lot more ability to mix and match and try to some subtle adjustments, which is really important. Back in the day in one-piece mouthpieces, if you didn't get the right thing, and you could make a few adjustments, but after a certain period of time, then that's it. You can't do much more. And it's been great to kind of move things around and try some different combinations. So it's been great.
Yeah, Grant, so you touched on adjustments. Adjustments is key. So with mouthpieces, when you're first trying a mouthpiece, what do you look for? Is it a feel or is it a sound? What drives you to a specific mouthpiece?
Well, there's a little bit feel. For me, feel is more, in a lot of ways, it's different in the plating. As far as the way it feels on my mouth, I've got some specific ideas about that. But I think one thing that's important, especially for younger players to know, if you're trying a trumpet or trying a mouthpiece, it's unlikely that you can make an adequate decision in a day or two. I think it's important to spend at least a few weeks playing it, because you don't know if it's just different or if it's actually solving some of the problems you've been looking for. Sometimes it feels different. You think, wow, this is great. This is sounding much more like I want to sound. And then over the course of time, you may find that other areas are not quite as good as what you had before. So that's the main thing, is just to spend some time with it. And then obviously, I think the sound that you get. But again, I'm the kind of person that thinks that it's operator error if it doesn't sound right. If you get close to the right kind of equipment, it's probably repetition and practicing the right kind of way, stuff that happens before it gets to the mouthpiece that's usually critical in how it sounds. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I keep backing it up from the instrument to the mouthpiece to what's in front of the mouthpiece, and that's usually where the solution occurs. If you're in the, that is, if you're in the right general area as far as size and according to your teeth and the size of your lips and that kind of thing. So, you know, different students, that's going to, you know, that's going to be a different story. But for me, that's really what I try to emphasize.
Yeah. So Jason, is it more of a feel or a sound? What are you looking for when you're trying out a mouthpiece?
Sound is going to always be the most important thing. And how does the mouthpiece help me get the sound that I'm looking for? But feel is also important too. I mean, if it's really uncomfortable, it's going to be difficult to produce a really nice sound. So I think they kind of blend together a little bit. But like Grant said, I think when you're kind of in the ballpark for where you should be, you know, based on your, you know, your trumpet health, like if you're in shape and you're playing well, you kind of get to a spot where you're just really nailing in small things. And I agree with all the things that Grant just said. My analogy is you've got to figure out if it's the plumber or the plumbing, and usually it's the plumber in my case. And so I always assume that I'm the one that's got the problem, not my equipment.
Yeah, and having said that, I mean, I think we all change over time. Our teeth change a little bit. You know, the tissue changes a little bit. You know, sometimes you need to create a little more room. Maybe there's one of my old teachers said maybe it's like maybe you need to find a new piece of meat to play on once in a while because the one's getting a little bit tired. But you know, I think we change. You know, your feet change. You need to get different shoes that fit better. We change as we get older, and I think sometimes subtle adjustments are important, and you just have to decide when that is. So.
Yeah, so based on that, we have a question that just came in. So we'll go with Jason. So how do you assess the difference between the way you think it sounds versus the way it really sounds, behind the bell and then in front of the bell?
That's a great question, and that's really hard. I was thinking about that after the initial sound conversation we had a few minutes ago, and I think a super important element of understanding sound is being able to listen and to being able to hear and understand what you're hearing. And I really didn't get that clarity in that kind of listening until I got to graduate school. And when I was studying with Bill Campbell, he really helped me understand to hear resonance. And when you hear words like resonance and ring and overtones, kind of figuring out what that, you can know what that is, but you have to be able to hear it and you have to develop that hearing. And so the first answer I would say is I would try to develop what that hearing is on my own. And as you learn to hear those nuances better, you can judge no matter if you're playing or not. And then the second thing that I would say is you find people that you trust, that you know understand those things, and you play for them. And so go to a place, you know, when we can go to places in the future, go to a nice hall or some kind of space that you're going to be able to really play comfortably, and then have people you trust, whether it's your teacher or a friend that you know really gets it, and play for them and see what they're hearing, you know, 20 feet in front of you, as opposed to what you're hearing. And so I find that works better than maybe recording yourself. It's sometimes hard to hear that subtlety through a recorder, a Zoom camera or your phone, even really good microphones, you know. So short answer, I try to develop the ability to understand that myself when I'm hearing it. And it takes a while to hear that. And then also to play for people that I trust. Those are kind of what I do.
I would agree with that. I mean, playing for people you know can hear what you're looking for. That's really important. And playing for non-trumpet players too. Sometimes playing for other musicians, they can make some really interesting assessments of your sound and what they hear that you didn't really hear in your playing. I think that's really important. So, you know, there's no substitute for good ears, whether they're trumpet players or brass players in general or other musicians. So that's a great way to do it. I've actually found that working on this Thompson buzzing book that there are subtle changes I can hear subtle changes in my actual buzz when I can tell that it's the right kind of sound I want to make, and that is it different than just that normal buzzing that we all do. But you can really hear subtle differences in that if the balance is right and everything's working correctly. So you just have to dig in and really be interested and do a lot of reading and try to understand and listen carefully. And then obviously get out there and play for somebody who can hear you and tell you what they hear.
Yeah, that's great. So another question just came in. We touched on this briefly at the beginning. So Jason, with the impact of social distancing on student learning and development, what are some of your strategies for keeping students motivated?
I think even if we're separated, by social distancing, I think what people really want is they want connection, and they want to know that you care about them. And so if we as teachers or colleagues or friends can show that we are interested in checking in constantly, that's one way just to help people feel like they're known and loved and you're thinking about them. That's an important thing. But I think you can come up with new things. So for example, some of the things that I've been doing with some of my students, I have a student that is really wanting to do, he was going to go to the ITG and play this summer, and he was wanting to do more competitions. And so he's going to do the ICTIS competition that is an all online competition. And so we just had a lesson yesterday actually and made some goals with some of the pieces he's going to play, and just doing it online and talking about strategies with how you would record yourself and things like that, especially in these circumstances. I think that's one way for him that he got really excited. Doing projects together, you could have remotely recording each other and making videos and doing things like that. Even if you don't share them, just doing it, I think that, like I said earlier, I'm trying to address weaknesses. This is a great time to do it because we don't have other music we're performing. And so if you can kind of help your students or friends see the benefit of focusing on weaknesses, and especially being able to do it right now when you're cooped up. When this is over, we have the opportunity to really be better than we were when we went into it because we can focus on those things. And so goals are a big thing for me. And so trying to help students find out what their goals are, and just kind of being a resource to help them achieve that, I think is, in my mind, something that I think would motivate them. And then also experimenting with new stuff. Grant was talking earlier about Leonard Candelaria, who's a good friend of mine. And I remember hearing him play La Virgen de la Macarena and just hearing it, it sounded like Mendez. And the other day I remembered hearing him play that in China last year. And so I got that out and I'm starting to learn it. It's kind of like filling my want to be a mariachi trumpet player a little bit. And anyway, so trying new things, and learning new stuff. And because we're not around other people right now, you have the protection of not looking weak or whatever. I think it's a strength to play your weaknesses, but you can really do that now and not have other people hear it. So I think that focusing on those types of things can really keep you positive.
Yeah. Great stuff. Do you have any thoughts there, Grant?
Yeah, I think I've done more with sharing links to great musical performances with my students, trying to expand what they understand the musical world holds for them. I sent them a recording the other day of an encore that Hilary Hahn did of a Bach partita or something with some symphony. It was stunning, and they first thought, well, this is violin, why'd you send this? But then they heard it and it was clear. I didn't have any explanation. I didn't need any explanation. And I had them listen to that New York Philharmonic Mahler 5 recording. And I asked them a bunch of questions all the way through it. I mean, seemingly for many of us, they've maybe who have watched or been involved in orchestral playing a lot, but I asked them, what key was here's the score. What key were the trumpets playing in? And of course, a lot of them, it said trumpet in B. So they all said it was in B. And we just learned something right then, that doesn't mean B. And I asked them a lot of questions about, the performance. And I think they were interested in that. And they were introduced to the whole Mahler 5 symphony. It was incredible. So I'm doing that and trying to expand what they're seeing online. But I also think, Jason's right. This is the time to come out of this better than we were. And like many of them, they always come in and they play when I have them do technique exams, whether it's Clark or Arbin or scales, they'll play the keys that are most familiar quite quickly, and then the difficult keys quite slowly. And I tell them all, why don't you take the metronome down, find which of these Clark exercises you struggle with most. Whatever metronome marking that is, play all of them at that. And then every day, play it perfectly that day at that slow marking. And then every day, turn it up 2 clicks. That's going to take a while, but you've got time now. Every day, 2 clicks faster, than all their fundamentals gradually come up to where they're playing just different keys, not familiar and unfamiliar keys. So I think maybe some of them do that. This is a great time to do it, but I'm not sure how many of them. But I think this is the time, and I'm working on, like Jason said, I'm working on some of my deficiencies right now, which are many. But you just got to keep hammering away at them, because that's the only way to get better, is to attack the stuff you don't do well, rather than playing the stuff you sound great on. So
yeah, it's all great points. We have a few funny questions that kind of came in, so I will ask those so we can have a little bit of fun. We'll start with Jason. If you had only one trumpet to play for the rest of your life, if you had a B flat or C trumpet for one trumpet forever, what would you choose?
A C trumpet.
Okay, why?
I went about 8 years, and I think I played my C trumpet. I played a B flat trumpet maybe 8 minutes in 8 years. That was a mistake that I'm now still trying to fix. But I just, before I really wanted to become a teacher, I wanted to play in an orchestra, and that's what I spent so much time doing from 9th grade all the way until the more I did that, the more I realized I really wanted to teach, and that's what I felt drawn to. And I'm a teacher because that's what I wanted to do. But because of that, I spent so many hours playing excerpts and playing in orchestras and doing that the C trumpet just kind of became my home base. That's the sound that I started to develop, and it was always my goal that I would play either my C trumpet or my B flat, and you couldn't tell what I was playing. And anyway, it's just because I didn't play on C trumpet so much, it just became my home base. So if I had to do it, I'd probably pick C trumpet.
Okay, so Grant, would it be B flat or C forever?
I think now it would be B flat. I mean, over the years, I play that most with my students, and there was a time when I would have said C, but right now I think it's B flat. That feels like home to me. So right now, if I had from now on, it would be B flat.
Okay. Next question, very important question. Jason, what's your favorite food? Stumped him.
Clearly, I like a lot of different kinds of food. I would have to say I've gotten in on the last 2 years on smoking meat on a smoker. And so anything that I would cook there, I think, has become my favorite food. But I don't know. I'm from Texas, so it's kind of like Central Texas brisket or Tex-Mex. Maybe is my favorite.
Yeah. So Grant, what's your favorite food?
Oh boy, I think I don't eat as much red meat as I used to, so that's why it's that much more special. But really good barbecue, I would agree. Yeah, any kind of I don't really care. I'm not a big rib guy, but any kind of barbecue that's really, really good is fantastic. And of course, every time we go to ITG, our webmaster, Michael Anderson, is always in the know about the best place to go. And we've been to a great place. What's it called? The Blue Door in Lexington? Is that what it's called?
About a 2-minute walk from our shop.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And there's a great place in Springfield here that Michael Anderson came down and went to with me and said it was as good as any place he's been to. So probably barbecue, because I don't eat as much red meat, so it's that big of a treat when I get to have it.
Yeah, speaking of Blue Door, it's like when Doug Lindsay and Steve Pride up in Cincinnati, the Cincinnati Symphony there, they're like, hey, can we go down for barbecue and maybe some mouthpieces? It's like, yeah, come on down. We'll get some barbecue. Yeah, but yeah, it's super convenient, especially when we have Blue Door, only about 2 or 3 minute walk from our shop, because everyone comes for a mouthpiece fitting or whatever to come see us. You got to go get some lunch. And it's tricky. We've learned over the years exactly when to go, because if you go at a certain time, you have to wait like 45 minutes, or sometimes you go too late, they're out of food. So it all depends on, you just never know.
Right.
And one thing that's unique food wise by our shop is we're right next to the Jif Smucker's factory. So on some Thursday morning when I get there, some Thursdays at like 7 a.m., you get out of your car, you can smell peanuts. They're roasting peanuts for peanut butter. And it's quite delicious. But so next question, we'll go with Grant first. So crazy performance stories. Do you have a certain performance that just did not go right, or something touring, or any reason something was funny when you were musically or on tour?
Oh boy, let me think. There's been plenty of performances that didn't go just right. And that kind of makes us who we are, I think, as players. That helps us get better. Funny, crazy stories. I did tour. I toured in 1989. I toured through 26 states in Canada with the Dallas Brass, and I got to play standing next to Whiff Rudd for 9 months. And that was like a 9-month lesson right there. But oftentimes we would pile out of the van and walk into a place and kind of get the blood pumping and then play a concert. And there'd be 3,000 people there, a community concert thing. I think one crazy story is we showed up there's this big church down in Fort Lauderdale, and they always broadcast their performances. And we thought it was just a broadcast for the congregation to use later. So we thought there'd be maybe a few cameras there. And we got in there and did our rehearsal with this organist. Her name was Diane Bish. She's quite famous. We're doing all these arrangements. And then we got out there for the performance. We're thinking, oh, this is pretty good. We've gone through this stuff. And we stepped out there to play this stuff. And the lights all came on, and there were cameras everywhere. And it was being broadcast live. So that's kind of a crazy, frightening thing to be in when you had one rehearsal and all the cameras are on and you're live and you're being broadcast everywhere. But it turned out fine. But those kind of experiences really kind of contribute to who you are as a musician and help you grow up pretty fast. So that's the craziest one. I'm sure there's others they're more crazy than that, but that's one.
Well, we did have Jens on last week, so we had some crazy.
I'm sure.
So Jason,
he invites crazy though.
So Jason, what do you have?
I got two quick ones I'll share. One's a kind of a funny one. When I did my undergraduate degree at BYU, where I now teach, and one of the interesting things about BYU is that they have their large ensembles that go on tours regularly. And one of the years that I was here, the chamber orchestra went on a tour of Europe, and one of the pieces that we played was the Pulcinella Suite by Stravinsky. And I had this goal to go the entire tour, like 17 performances, and never miss one of the high C's at the end. And we got to like concert number 13, and we were in Prague in the Czech Republic, in this beautiful place that has reverb that still is ringing there. And this was like concert 13, and I hadn't missed one of the high C's yet at the end. And then on this one, though, I missed the last note, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, splat all over the place. And I think it's still ringing there, 20 years later. And but the thing that was like so bad about it is because it was consistent before then, I don't think people knew that it was maybe as hard as it felt. And when it happened, everybody just turned around, the whole orchestra. And I felt like the whole world was looking at me. It was pretty awful. And I didn't miss it again. It was just that one miss. Anyway, but I still remember how bad that was. And then I have one that's not such a crazy story, but it was one of those kind of performances where you just kind of, you feel very, very lucky. And it was one of the ones, we talked earlier about this trumpet festival we had out here in January. And for me, just one of the special things was we had a brass band that was playing, and we got to play Song of Hope on that concert. And I was so fortunate to be able to play that with Ryan Anthony and Whiff Rudd, who are both super important mentors and heroes of mine. And just the feeling of what it was like at the end of that, when we hit that last chord and we finished the piece and we cut off, to just be able to feel the power of what it was to play that with Ryan and hear him and know what that song is about. And, Phil Smith was conducting, and it was a very overwhelming moment. It was really inspiring. I'll never forget it. And I just felt really grateful. And I'm thankful to have had many performances like that. I also remember another one too, that we were talking about performances at ITG. I remember last year, Grant and I got to play a duet. And when that just being able to play that with Grant was really special. And then we found out who else was playing on the concert, and we realized that the person right after us was Sergey.
Oh,
and
okay.
And so I was just so nervous about that, not just playing it at an ITG conference. But the funny thing was, he went out and played that piece that is the most insane thing ever written. And the all the trumpet players there, even the ones backstage, were looking at him just with their jaws open at what he could do. And so that was a really cool experience, I think. I don't know. Didn't you feel that way too, Grant? It was just kind of this guy is there's nobody else like him in the world.
There isn't. I've never seen such great trumpet players standing backstage, just speechless with their mouths open watching this. And the very cool thing about that I want to mention too is that we all played, and there were there's some great players on the stage, Matilda Lloyd and Daniel Crespo and
Amy McCabe.
And I kind of felt wow, we're really lucky to be standing up here.
Oh yeah.
But we got off at the end and we're standing backstage, and the kind of person and the kind of collaboration, the kind of the feeling you get at ITG with everyone helping each other. Sergei comes off, and he's clearly what the ovation is going on about. He walks off that stage and looks at every one of us and said, "You come with me. We're going out and taking a vow together. I'm not going out by myself." And that just kind of speaks to the way people act at the conference. It's not a selfish kind of thing. Everyone's in this together. And then we shared the stage, and he invited us to come back with him. And I thought that spoke very highly of him as a person.
Yeah, that's it. Both you touched on it, inspiring, just seeing the trumpet community. And before we wrap up, I want to say both of you, thank you from the trumpet community, everything you guys do, not just for your universities, but for the trumpet community and the International Trumpet Guild. It's a great organization. I still have my International Trumpet Guild books and brochures and everything from years and years and years ago. I was just cleaning last week, and I found some brochures and old stuff, and it's super cool. And from the trumpet community, to you guys, thank you for everything you guys do for the International Trumpet Guild.
Well, thank you.
Thanks.
I encourage everyone to go to the trumpetguild.org and look at the journal we've provided for everyone to be able to see it during this kind of weird time. And then come to a conference. That's the only way you really find out how fantastic it is. We'd love to have you there next year.
Yeah. Well, guys, I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us on this little brass chat. And we'll definitely catch up more next year in Anaheim. And I wish you both the best.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks for having us.
All the best to you too.
All right. Take care, guys. Bye.
See you later. Thank you.